He labeled the memory card himself. 4 words, written in his own handwriting, on a tiny piece of card that he slipped into a case and left sitting in his truck like it was nothing. Like it was a grocery list or a parking receipt or any other meaningless scrap of paper that a person carries without thinking. The label said Homicide at Midtown Marriott. He wrote that, and then he put it in his truck. And he drove around Anchorage, Alaska with it sitting right there, in his vehicle, with his name on the registration, his face on the insurance. His whole ordinary life wrapped around the most extraordinary evidence of evil that any investigator in that state had ever held in their hands. A woman stole that phone from his truck on a date. She took it home. She found the card. She put it in her laptop. And what she saw on that screen, 39 photographs and 12 videos of a man with a distinctive South African accent doing things to a woman that no human being should ever see, sent her straight to the Anchorage Police Department. That man's name was Brian Stephen Smith. And here's the thing that should make every single person watching this feel the ground shift beneath them. 1 year before that memory card was found, a woman had already gone to the police about Brian Stephen Smith, a former girlfriend. She told them he had confessed to her, that he had sat across from her and told her he had killed someone. The police said there was not enough evidence to act. He killed again. And then the memory card arrived, and investigators watched the videos. And a detective named David Cordy sat in a room and listened to a voice he recognized from a prior investigation, a distinctive British South African accent narrating violence with turns of glee and annoyance. And he said something in one of those videos that has never left anyone who has heard it. He said, "Everybody dies in my movies. Today we are going to Anchorage, Alaska. We are going to follow every woman Brian Stephen Smith targeted, every warning sign the system ignored, and every moment of a community that refused to let their daughters be forgotten. And we are going to ask the question that a former police officer asked publicly in front of cameras in 2026. How many more women are still out there? Before we go to that hotel room, before we stand in the Midtown Marriott and understand what those videos showed you, need to know who Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abouchuk were. Not the case files, not the documentary, them. Kathleen Jo Henry was 30 years old, Alaska native. A woman who had survived things that most people cannot imagine, surviving clergy, abuse, displacement from her rural community, addiction, homelessness. She had been pushed to the edges of Anchorage society by a combination of systemic failures and personal tragedies that compounded on each other the way they do for Indigenous women in Alaska, with a regularity that the state has never adequately confronted. But here is what the people who loved her said, not what the case file said, what the people who knew her said. She was a beloved family member, a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone whose absence left a shape in the world that nobody else could fill. Veronica Abouchuk was 52 years old, also Alaska native, also displaced from her rural community, also navigating homelessness in Anchorage, also someone who had been let down by systems that were supposed to protect her long before Brian Stephen Smith ever found her. Her sister Rena Sapp said something after the verdict that landed with the weight of 20 years of grief compressed into a single sentence. She said, "It is not done. This is not the end for Brian Smith. There are more." She was not speaking abstractly. She was speaking from evidence, from photographs found on Smith's phones of women whose names investigators still do not know, from a community that has been losing its daughters to a system that classified certain missing women under an unspoken internal designation that a former Anchorage police officer revealed publicly in The Lost Women of Alaska documentary. The designation was NHI. No human involved. A secret policy applied to certain missing persons cases. A classification that told investigators before they even began this, one does not count. Kathleen Jo Henry counted. Veronica Abouchuk counted. Every woman whose photograph Brian Stephen Smith kept on his phone and whose name investigators still cannot identify, she counted. And somewhere in the silence of a system that had already failed them before he found them, Brian Stephen Smith saw an opportunity. Brian Stephen Smith was not from Alaska. He was not even from America. He was born in South Africa. He had immigrated to the United States. By 2018, he was living in Anchorage, a city of nearly 300,000 people wedged between the Chugach Mountains and Cook Inlet, the largest city in the largest state in the Union. A place with all the anonymity of a major American city and all the remoteness of the Alaskan wilderness simultaneously. He had a wife, Stephanie Bisland, a job, a life that looked, from the outside, completely ordinary, neighbors who knew him, a routine that placed him in normal spaces every single day. He was not drifting. He was not visibly unstable. He was not the unsettling presence that neighborhoods notice and remember. He was just there, in the city, moving through it, choosing. And what he was choosing with specificity, with deliberation, with the particular patience of a man who understood that certain women in Anchorage could disappear without the full force of law enforcement immediately mobilizing to find them, were women who were vulnerable, women who were unhoused, women who had already been failed by the systems that were supposed to protect them. He knew what he was doing. The memory card label proves it. You do not write the words "Homicide" at Midtown Marriott on a card unless you know exactly what you have done and you are not afraid of it. Unless the act of killing has become so normalized in your own internal world that you can label it like a filing system. He labeled it, and he left it in his truck, and he went about his life. August of 2018. Veronica Abouchuk was reported missing in Anchorage. She was 52 years old. The police filed the report, and then the investigation moved with a slowness that her family would spend years trying to understand. She was not found. She was not actively searched for in the way that other missing persons cases command resources and urgency. She was on a list, a very long list. In a state where over 1,300 people are reported missing and the active investigation list contains approximately 100 names, 100 out of 1,300. What happens to the other 1,200? They go on the inactive list. They wait. Their families call, and sometimes the phone gets answered, and sometimes it does not. A former Anchorage police officer named Michael Livingston, who spent 28 years in Alaska law enforcement, described what he saw inside those departments. The unspoken understanding that certain cases mattered less. The NHI designation applied before investigators had even begun to look. Veronica Abouchuk was missing for over a year before anyone confirmed what had happened to her. Brian Stephen Smith had been in the living room when he killed her. He told police that himself. Later, when he had already been arrested for something else entirely, when the memory card and the videos and the photographs had already been found. He sat in an interrogation room, and without any prompting, without investigators even asking, he turned to the troopers and said, "I am going to make you famous." He came back in, he sat down. He said, "You guys got some more time? You want to keep talking?" And then he told them about Veronica. He told them where she was. He led them to her. September 4th, 2019. Kathleen Jo Henry was 30 years old. She had been in the Midtown Marriott Hotel in Anchorage with Brian Stephen Smith. What happened in that room was captured on video. 12 videos, 39 photographs. Evidence so graphic that the district attorney stood in front of the jury at the beginning of the trial and said, "You will all carry the burden of knowledge. I am sorry that you will carry the burden of this heavy, heavy knowledge." A juror named Matt Duncan later said he currently sees a therapist to help him cope with what he saw and heard during those weeks in that courtroom. He said it was absolutely horrific. That man is a monster. Smith narrated what he did, in his distinctive accent, with turns of glee and annoyance. As if Kathleen Jo Henry's 30 years of life, everything she had survived, everything she had loved, everyone who would spend the rest of their lives without her, was content for his personal archive. "Everybody dies in my movies." He said that, on camera, while he was killing her. The memory card ended up in his truck. The label was written in his hand. And 1 year later, a woman on a date with him stole his phone and found what was on it and took it to the police. Her name was Valerie Kasler. A woman who stole a phone, and in doing so became the reason Brian Stephen Smith was ever caught. The reason Kathleen Jo Henry's family ever got an answer. The reason Veronica Abouchuk was found. One woman, one stolen phone. That is what it took. Before we go any further, Because we just crossed into the part of this story that the Lost Women of Alaska documentary put on HBO Max screens on the 25th of February 2026, and that the entire country has been sitting with since. Not the killer, not the memory card, the system. A former girlfriend told Anchorage police a year before the memory card was found that Brian Stephen Smith had confessed to murder. They said there was not enough evidence. They did not act. A woman named Cassandra Boskovsky went missing in Anchorage in 2019. During Smith's sentencing, advocates found photographs in court documents. Photographs taken by Smith of a woman lying on the ground, battered, clothed, possibly dead or unconscious. They published those photographs immediately. Her family identified her immediately. The police had those photographs since 2019. They had never released them. They had never publicly asked for help identifying her. Cassandra Boskovsky was not on the active missing persons list. Her Aunt Terry said, "When we found out about the pictures, it hurt. She is our family and we love and miss her very much." Her family declared her legally dead in September of 2024. No charges have been filed in connection with Cassandra Boskovsky. So here is what I want you to answer in the comments right now. Before we continue, think about what you just heard. A police department that had photographs of a potential victim in a serial killer's possession since 2019 and never released them publicly. A woman whose family had to find out through a court document that her picture was on a killer's phone. Does that make you angry? Does it change how you think about who gets protected in this country and who does not? Tell me, because that conversation is the most important one this case has ever produced. Subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell. Because this case is still developing, there is a third unidentified victim whose photographs are still being circulated by investigators right now in 2026. When she is identified, you need to be here. Share this video, because Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abouchuk deserve to have their names known by everyone who watches true crime, not just the communities that mourn them. The trial of Brian Stephen Smith began in February of 2024. In Anchorage, 5 years after his arrest. 5 years of legal delays, pandemic postponements, evidence battles, and a community that had been waiting with extraordinary patience that should not have been required of them for a courtroom to finally say what the memory card had already proven. Prosecutors Brittany Dunlop and Heather Nobrega presented the jury with everything: the videos, the photographs, the confessions, the forensic evidence. The cell phone records that placed Smith at the crime locations, the DNA that confirmed his connection to Abouchuk, the testimony of Valerie Kassler, the woman who stole the phone, who was challenged by the defense as unreliable, who sat on that stand and told the court what she had seen on that screen and why she had gone to the police. Smith's attorney argued for acquittal. He argued Kassler was unreliable. He argued the evidence had been contaminated. The jury disagreed. 14 counts. 14 guilty verdicts: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, sexual assault, tampering with evidence. The specific aggravated finding that what was done to Kathleen Jo Henry constituted substantial physical torture. Brian Stephen Smith sat in that courtroom and showed no emotion. On the 15th of July, 2024, Anchorage Superior Court Judge Kevin Saxby sentenced him to 226 years in prison, the maximum, every year that prosecutors had asked for. Judge Saxby said Smith was beyond rehabilitation. Outside the courthouse, women dressed in red, carrying signs that said "We do not feel safe" and "Honk for Justice" gathered to mark the moment, red handprints on their faces, the symbol of the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement. A symbol that says we are here, we are counted, we are not on the inactive list. Smith did not speak at his sentencing. His wife sat directly behind him in the gallery. He did not turn around to look at her. He did not look at anyone. There is a forensic sketch posted on the wall outside the courthouse during sentencing. A large poster-sized rendering of a woman's face, possibly Alaska Native, possibly Smith's third victim, found in photographs on one of his cell phones. She is battered in the images. It is not clear whether she is alive or dead. She has not been identified. Her family, if she has family, does not yet know that her photograph is on a serial killer's phone. Or maybe they do know, And they are sitting somewhere in Alaska with the particular kind of grief that comes from knowing and not being officially confirmed. The specific cruelty of the inactive list of NHI. Investigators released that sketch publicly after sentencing. They have asked anyone who recognizes her to come forward. As of today, she remains unidentified. Brian Stephen Smith is serving 226 years in an Alaskan prison. Alaska does not have the death penalty. He will die there. He will die having filmed his crimes with the confidence of a man who believed certain women would not be missed, who labeled a memory card Homicide at Midtown Marriott and left it in his truck because he had calculated correctly for a time that the system would not come for him. He was wrong. Eventually. But eventually is not fast enough. Eventually does not bring back Kathleen Jo Henry or Veronica Abouchuk. Eventually does not put Cassandra Boskovsky on the active list 5 years before her family saw her photograph in a court document. Eventually does not explain to over 1,200 people sitting on an inactive list in Alaska why their disappearance did not make it onto the 100-person active investigation roster. The Lost Women of Alaska documentary premiered on Investigation Discovery and HBO Max on the 25th of February 2026. Executive producer Octavia Spencer said in her statement that the project confronts the devastating intersection of race and systemic failures that perpetuate violence against Indigenous women. Devastating intersection. That phrase deserves to sit with you. Because Brian Stephen Smith did not create the conditions that made Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abouchuk vulnerable, he found conditions that already existed. He found a city where certain women could disappear, and the system's first instinct was to move them to an inactive list rather than mobilize every available resource. He found a community that had been raising alarms about missing Indigenous women for years and being told there was not enough evidence to act. He found the gap, and he operated in it for years. Veronica Abouchuk's sister, Rena Sapp, said it on the day of sentencing. She said it is not done. This is not the end for Brian Smith. There are more. A forensic sketch of a woman nobody has named yet is still sitting on a bulletin board somewhere in Anchorage, waiting for a face to be attached to it. Families across Alaska are looking at that sketch, and some of them are recognizing something but are not sure enough to call. Some of them are sure but have not been heard before and do not believe this time will be different. Brian Stephen Smith told investigators he was going to make them famous. He was wrong about that too. The women made them look. The women, the ones who survived him, who stole his phone, who identified photographs in court documents, who dressed in red outside a courthouse on sentencing day, they made the world look. Kathleen Jo Henry, Veronica Abouchuk, Cassandra Boskovsky, the woman in the sketch whose name we do not yet know. They are not on the inactive list. Not today. Not on this channel. Before you go, I want to leave you with one question. One question that the Lost Women of Alaska documentary asked, and that no politician or police chief has answered satisfactorily yet. If the system applies a secret designation called no human involved to certain missing persons cases, how many Brian Stephen Smiths are still out there right now, operating in the gap, because the women they target are not on the active list? Drop your answer in the comments, because that question deserves more than a documentary. It deserves a movement. Please subscribe to the Cold Case Signals. Ring that notification bell. Share this video. One share. One more person who hears Kathleen's name. One more person who hears Veronica's name. One more signal sent from Anchorage, Alaska, into a world that should have been listening years before the memory card was found. We have more cases coming. More signals. More stories told the way they deserve, with depth, with truth, and with absolute respect for every woman at the center of them. Kathleen, Veronica, Cassandra, and the woman in the sketch whose name we are still waiting to learn. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.